The sun was already high in the sky, beating down on the concrete of Los Angeles, but inside the old sedan, the air was thick and heavy. It was the kind of heat that makes it hard to breathe, the kind that sticks to your skin and makes you feel tired before the day has even really started. For most people in the city, this was just another Tuesday. They were in their air-conditioned offices, drinking iced coffee, or driving to meetings with the windows rolled up and the music playing. But for the young woman sitting in the driver's seat, this car was not a way to get somewhere. It was everything. She shifted in her seat, trying to find a comfortable spot, but there was none. The seat was reclined as far as it would go, but her legs were still cramped, and her back ached from sleeping in a curled-up position night after night. In the passenger seat beside her, a baby boy let out a small, sleepy sigh. He was the only thing keeping her going. He was the reason she was still fighting, even when she felt like she had absolutely nothing left to give. 3 months ago, her life looked completely different. She had a job, a small apartment, and a door that locked to keep the world out. But life can change in the blink of an eye. It started with the rent going up, an amount she just couldn't afford. Then came the loss of her job, followed by a string of bad luck that felt like a heavy weight pushing her down deeper and deeper. She tried everything. She applied for jobs, called shelters, and reached out to old friends, but the world is a busy place, and people are often too wrapped up in their own lives to notice someone drowning right next to them. Eventually, the eviction notice came, and with no family to take her in, she and her baby were forced into their car. At first, she thought it would be temporary. She thought, surely, I can figure this out in a week or two. But a week turned into a month, and a month turned into 3. Now, the car was their entire world. It was their bedroom, their kitchen, and their living room all mashed into one hot, metal box. She sat up slowly, being careful not to wake the baby, and looked at herself in the rearview mirror. Dark circles under her eyes, hair that hadn't been washed in days, and a look of pure exhaustion on her face. She didn't recognize the person staring back at her anymore. She felt invisible. When you are homeless, you learn quickly how to disappear. You keep your head down, you avoid eye contact, and you try to look as normal as possible so that nobody calls the police or asks you to move along. The morning routine was the hardest part. She needed to find a bathroom to wash up and get the baby ready for the day. She checked her phone. Her service was about to be cut off, another bill she couldn't pay. She had exactly $20 left to her name. $20 had to cover gas, food, and diapers for the next 2 days. The math didn't work. It never worked anymore. She gently started the car, praying it would turn over. The engine coughed and sputtered before roaring to life, and she let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. As she pulled out of the quiet side street where she had parked for the night, she joined the flow of traffic. Everyone around her was in a rush. People honked their horns, swerved between lanes, and shouted at each other. They were angry about being 5 minutes late. She would have given anything to have their problems. To be angry about traffic instead of wondering where her next meal was coming from. She drove to a gas station on the edge of the city, a place where the attendants usually didn't bother her if she bought a bottle of water. She parked and went inside with the baby on her hip. The air conditioning in the store hit her face like a blessing, and for a second, she just closed her eyes and stood there. She bought the cheapest water she could find and used the restroom to splash some cold water on her face and try to clean up the baby. It felt undignified, washing up in a public sink, but she had lost her dignity a long time ago. Now, she just focused on survival. Back in the car, the heat had already built up again. She gave the baby a bottle, watching him drink hungrily. He was so innocent, smiling at her between sips, completely unaware that their life was falling apart. That smile was her anchor. When she looked at him, she knew she couldn't give up, no matter how hard it got. She had to keep moving. She had to keep trying. But as the day went on, the weight of it all pressed down on her harder than ever. She drove around, looking for a safe place to park during the day. A spot where she wouldn't be hassled, where the baby could nap, and where she could think. She found a spot near a park and sat there, watching happy families walking by with strollers and picnic baskets. She used to be like them. She used to walk in the park without a care in the world. Now, she felt like she was watching life from behind a glass wall. Everyone else was living, and she was just surviving. Her phone buzzed with a notification, a reminder of a bill that was overdue. She turned the phone off, unable to look at the numbers anymore. She felt a tear slide down her cheek, hot and fast. She wiped it away angrily. Crying didn't help. Crying didn't put gas in the tank or a roof over their heads. But the hopelessness was a monster that lived in the back seat with them, growing bigger every day. She was so tired of running, so tired of pretending that everything was okay. She felt like she was one bad day away from completely losing it. She looked around the car, at the pile of clothes in the back seat, the blankets, the empty baby formula cans stacked in the cup holder. This was her home. This was the reality she was trapped in. As the afternoon sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the city, she felt a heavy darkness settle in her chest. She didn't know how she was going to get through tomorrow, let alone next week. She felt completely, utterly alone. In a city of millions of people, there was no one there to catch her. She just kept driving, letting the road take her nowhere, wondering how much longer she could keep doing this before everything finally fell apart. The afternoon sun was beginning its slow descent, but the heat was still trapped in the pavement, rising up in waves that blurred the horizon. The old car rolled slowly through the busy parking lot, the engine making a rattling sound that seemed to echo in the quiet woman's mind. She was gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. Her stomach was twisting into knots, a familiar feeling that had nothing to do with hunger. This was the hardest part of the day: public places. She needed to go into the grocery store. She had to buy formula for the baby and maybe something small for herself to eat, but the parking lot was crowded. It felt like there were eyes everywhere. To a normal person, a parking lot is just a place to leave your car while you shop. To her, it was a stage where she felt like everyone was watching her, judging her. She felt like she had a giant invisible sign on her roof that screamed out her situation. She circled around twice, looking for the perfect spot. She didn't want to be too close to the entrance where all the fancy cars parked, because her car was messy and smelled faintly of old clothes and baby powder. She didn't want to be too far back in the corners, either, because that was where security usually patrolled, looking for people loitering or sleeping in their vehicles. Finally, she found a spot near the back of a row, sandwiched between a large delivery truck and an empty space. It felt safe enough. It felt hidden. She put the car in park and turned off the engine. The sudden silence was heavy. In the back seat, the baby was starting to stir, waking up from his nap. He let out a small, cranky cry. The woman's heart sank. She hated when he cried in public, it drew attention. She quickly turned around, reaching out a hand to stroke his cheek. "SHH, SHH, it's okay," she whispered, her voice cracking slightly. "We're okay. Just give me a minute." She took a deep breath and looked in the mirror again. She tried to smooth down her hair with her hands. She looked exhausted. There was no way around it. She looked exactly like what she was, a mother who had been fighting a war for months without any sleep. She felt a deep wave of shame wash over her. She grabbed a dirty blanket from the front seat and threw it over the pile of clothes and boxes in the back, trying to make the car look a little less like a home and more like, well, just a messy car. It didn't help much. As she unbuckled her seat belt to get out and grab the baby, a sleek, black car turned into the aisle. It moved smoothly and quietly, the complete opposite of her rattling ride. It was one of those expensive electric cars that looked like it from the future. She watched it in her side mirror, expecting it to drive past her toward the front of the store. But it didn't. The black car slowed down. Its signal light clicked on a bright, orange flash. It was pulling into the empty spot right next to hers. The woman froze. Why, here the entire lot was half empty. There were 10 other empty spots on this row alone. Why did this person have to park right next to her? She felt a spike of anxiety. She didn't want to be trapped next to someone. She didn't want them to look through the window and see the blankets, the diaper bags, the mess of her life. The expensive car backed in perfectly, straight and centered. It stopped, and for a moment, nothing happened. The woman sat in her driver's seat, holding her breath, praying the person would just get out and walk away. She looked down at her hands, trying to make herself as small as possible. Then, the door of the black car opened. A man stepped out. He was wearing simple jeans, a t-shirt, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He didn't look like a businessman or a celebrity. He looked just like a regular guy running an errand. He was holding a phone in one hand, checking a message, and had a backpack slung over one shoulder. The woman glanced at him, just a quick look, but then she did a double take. She knew that face. Everyone in the world knew that face. It was Keanu Reeves. Her heart skipped a beat, but not for the reason you might think. Most people would be excited to see a movie star. They would want a selfie or an autograph. But right now, in that moment, she felt absolute terror. She felt panic rising in her throat. If anyone recognized her, it would be bad. But if a famous person saw her living in a car with a baby, she felt like her last shred of dignity would be destroyed. She imagined him looking at her with pity, or worse, disgust. She imagined him thinking, why is she parked here? Why is her car such a mess? She quickly turned her face away, looking out the passenger window, pretending to be busy. She grabbed a toy from the dashboard and fumbled with it nervously. Please don't look, please don't look, please don't look. She just wanted him to walk into the store. She needed him to walk into the store so she could grab her baby and run inside without being seen. She could hear him moving around outside. She heard the sound of him locking his car with a soft beep. Then, silence. She waited for his footsteps to fade away toward the store entrance. But the footsteps didn't fade away. They stopped. She could hear them on the pavement right outside her window. She squeezed her eyes shut. She could feel her face burning hot with embarrassment. She didn't want to turn her head. She just wanted to disappear. There was a gentle tap on the glass. It was so soft that for a second, she thought she imagined it. But then it came again. Tap, tap. The woman's whole body tensed up. Her first instinct was to start the car and drive away, but she couldn't. The baby was crying now, louder, and she was trapped. She had no choice. She slowly rolled down the window. The glass cranked down with a squeak, letting in the hot air and the sound of the traffic. She kept her eyes down, looking at the door handle of her car. She couldn't bring herself to look him in the eye. "Hi," a voice said. It wasn't a loud voice. It wasn't a commanding voice. It was quiet and calm. It sounded normal. "I'm sorry to bother you," the voice continued. "I noticed you sitting here for a minute, and I saw the little one in the back." The woman squeezed the steering wheel. She prepared herself for the worst. She expected him to ask her to move. Or maybe he would say she couldn't park there. Or maybe he was just going to ask for a donation to some charity, not realizing she had less than nothing. She finally forced herself to lift her head. She looked up, and there he was. Keanu Reeves? He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't looking around the parking lot. He was looking right at her. He wasn't smiling like he does in movies, but he wasn't frowning either. He just looked concerned. He had removed his sunglasses. His eyes were serious, and they were focused solely on her. He didn't look at the messy back seat. He didn't look at the pile of clothes she had tried to hide. He was just looking at her face. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "Do you need any help?" The question hung in the air between them. It was such a simple question. 3 little words. But to the woman, they hit her like a ton of bricks. Her throat tightened. She opened her mouth to speak, to tell him she was fine, to tell him to leave her alone, to put up the wall she had built so high over the last few months. But she couldn't lie. Not to him. Not when he was standing there in the heat, taking the time to stop. Not when he was the first person in months to actually look at her and ask if she was okay. The baby cried out again from the back seat, a sharp, needy sound. She felt a tear slide down her cheek before she could stop it. She wiped it away quickly, but it was too late. He saw it. He saw the crack in her armor. The parking lot was noisy, with cars driving by and shopping carts rattling, but in that space between the two cars, everything was suddenly very quiet. It felt like the world had stopped spinning just for them. She looked at the famous actor standing in the sun, looking like a regular man, and she realized she didn't have to be strong anymore. Not for this second. The tension in her shoulders dropped just a little, and she let out a shaky breath, preparing to tell the truth. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew that everything was about to change. The woman sat behind the steering wheel, her hands shaking so badly that she had to clasp them together in her lap to keep them still. The question hung in the hot air between them. "Do you need any help?" It was such a simple thing to ask, but it felt like the heaviest question in the world. She wanted to say no. She wanted to be strong. She wanted to tell him that everything was fine, that she was just resting, that she was just a regular mom waiting for her husband to come out of the store. She wanted to lie because the truth was too painful to speak out loud. But when she opened her mouth, the lie wouldn't come out. She looked at his face, at the kindness in his eyes, and the wall she had built around herself cracked. The baby let out another sharp cry from the back seat, and that was it. The dam broke. She took a deep, shuddering breath and felt the tears spill over, hot and fast against her cheeks. She couldn't stop them. She didn't wipe them away this time. She just looked down at her lap and whispered, I don't have anywhere to go." The words felt like stones dropping into a deep pit. She waited for him to step back. She waited for him to look uncomfortable, to make an excuse, to mumble an apology and walk away. That's what people usually did. They saw the messiness of homelessness, and it scared them. It reminded them that life is fragile, and they didn't want to look at it. But he didn't step back. He didn't look away. Instead, he leaned in a little closer, resting his arms on the edge of the car door so that he was on her level. He didn't look at her like she was a problem to be solved or a nuisance to be moved. He looked at her like she was a person. "It's okay," he said softly. His voice was low and steady, grounding her in the moment. "Take your time. I'm listening." For the next few minutes, the parking lot noises seemed to fade away. She found herself pouring her heart out to this complete stranger. She told him about the rent going up, the job loss, the desperate phone calls that went unanswered. She told him about the fear that gripped her every night when the sun went down and she had to find a safe place to park. She told him how hard it was to keep the baby clean and fed when she didn't have a kitchen or a bathroom. "I'm just so tired," she said, her voice cracking. "I try every day, but I can't get ahead. I just want a home for him." The man listened to every word. He didn't interrupt. He didn't check his watch. He didn't look around to see if anyone was watching him. He just stood there in the heat, letting her get it all out. When she finally stopped talking, the silence wasn't awkward anymore. It felt like a weight had been lifted off her chest, just a little bit. He looked toward the back seat where the baby was now fussing, his little face red and scrunched up. "He's beautiful," the man said, genuinely. "And you're doing a really hard job. You're doing the best you can." Hearing those words made her cry even harder, but this time, it wasn't just tears of sadness. It was relief. It was the first time in months that anyone had told her she was doing a good job. It was the first time anyone had acknowledged that her situation was hard, instead of judging her for being in it. "Listen," he said, standing up straight and looking toward the grocery store entrance. "I was just going in to grab a few things. Is there anything specific you need right now? Formula, diapers, food?" The woman shook her head instinctively. She felt bad taking anything from anyone, especially a stranger. "I can't. I don't have any money to pay you back." "I don't want you to pay me back," he said firmly, cutting her off gently. "I want to help. Just tell me what the baby needs." She hesitated, but her eyes drifted to the empty formula can on the floorboard. He needs formula. The powder kind. And we're almost out of diapers. Size 3. He nodded, memorizing the details instantly. "Okay. What about you? When was the last time you ate something?" She thought about it for a second. She had shared a granola bar with the baby for breakfast. "I had a little bit earlier," she lied. He raised an eyebrow, seeing right through her. "Okay. I'll be right back. Stay here. Don't go anywhere." He turned and walked toward the store. The woman watched him go, feeling like she was in a dream. She expected him to disappear into the crowd and never come back. Why would he come back? He was a millionaire. He could be anywhere in the world, doing anything. Why would he spend his Tuesday afternoon shopping for a stranger? She sat there, the engine off, the air getting hotter and stuffier by the minute. The baby started to cry again, a loud, wailing sound that echoed in the small car. She reached back and buckled him into his stroller, needing to get him out of the heat. She lifted him into her arms, holding him close to her chest, rocking back and forth. "Shh, it's okay," she whispered to him. "It's okay." 5 minutes passed. Then 10. She watched the automatic doors of the store slide open and close, letting people in and out. She saw an old couple carrying groceries. She saw a teenager on a bike. But she didn't see the man in the baseball cap. Maybe he did leave, she thought. Maybe he realized what a mess this was and decided it was too much trouble. She wouldn't have blamed him. She felt a familiar wave of disappointment wash over her. She shouldn't have gotten her hopes up. This was her life, and a random act of kindness wasn't going to fix it. Just as she was about to lower her head in defeat, the automatic doors opened again. He walked out pushing 2 shopping carts. They were piled high. Bags of groceries, boxes of diapers, cases of water. He had filled 2 entire carts. She stared in disbelief. He wasn't just grabbing a few things. He was buying a warehouse of supplies. He pushed the carts across the parking lot, dodging traffic, guiding them right up to the side of her car. He didn't say anything grand. He didn't make a speech. He just started unloading the bags. He reached in and took a large can of formula, the expensive brand she could never afford, and placed it gently on her front seat. Then came a big box of diapers. Then wipes. Then bananas, apples, bread, peanut butter, bottles of water, and bags of healthy food that she hadn't been able to eat in months. "I wasn't sure what you liked," he said, lifting a bag of sliced turkey and cheese. "But I figured this would be easy to make sandwiches with." He worked quickly and efficiently. He put the perishables in a small cooler bag he had bought, knowing she didn't have a fridge. He stacked the diapers and formula in the back, filling up the empty spaces where she kept her clothes. The car was smelling like fresh food and baby powder instead of stale air. The woman just held her son, watching him. She felt a lump in her throat so big she could barely swallow. This is too much," she stammered. "I can't take all this." "It's not too much," he said, looking at her with a serious expression. "You need this. He needs this. Please, take it." He finished unloading the last bag and looked at her, waiting for her to argue. But she didn't. She just nodded, overwhelmed by his generosity. He stepped back and wiped his hands on his jeans. For a second, she thought he was going to leave. She thought the interaction was over. She would say thank you, and he would drive away, and she would be left with a car full of groceries but still no place to go. But he didn't leave. He stood there, looking at her car, then at her face. He seemed to be thinking deeply. He saw the food, and he saw that the immediate hunger problem was solved. But he also saw the car. He saw the piles of clothes in the back. He saw the blankets. He knew that a tank of gas and a cart of food wasn't going to fix the real problem. He took a step closer to the open window. He looked her right in the eyes, his expression turning more serious. "You shouldn't be living in a car with a baby," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. "Nobody should." "I know," she whispered. "But the shelters are full, and I don't have a deposit for an apartment." He nodded slowly. "We're going to figure that out. You can't stay here tonight. It's not safe." The woman's heart skipped a beat. Figure that out? What did that mean? Was he just being nice, or was he actually going to do something else? She watched as he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He wasn't just a good Samaritan stopping for a moment. He was digging in. He was refusing to look away. And as he stood there, making a call, she realized that this wasn't the end of the story. This was just the beginning of something she never could have expected. He stood there by the open window, holding his phone to his ear, looking focused. The woman watched him with a mix of disbelief and anxiety. She could see his lips moving, but she couldn't hear what he was saying. A part of her brain was screaming that this was all a mistake, that he was going to call the police or a tow truck to have her removed from the lot. But looking at his face, the calmness in his eyes quieted that fear. He didn't look like someone who was about to cause trouble. He looked like a man making a business deal, but with a kindness in his expression that she hadn't seen in a long time. "Hi," he said into the phone. "I need to speak to someone in management, please." The baby in her arms squirmed, sensing her tension. She gently bounced him, trying to soothe him, but her eyes never left the man standing on the asphalt. The sun was starting to dip lower, casting long shadows across the parking lot. The heat was finally breaking, but the humidity was still thick. He paused for a moment, listening to the person on the other end. "Yes, this is Keanu," he said. He didn't say his last name. He didn't need to. The woman's eyes widened. He was using his name, the name that opened doors, the name that made people listen. But he wasn't using it to get into a fancy club or a restaurant. He was using it for her. "I'm calling about a room," he continued. "I don't need a reservation for myself. I need a room for a young woman and her baby. They are in a difficult situation. They need a place to stay immediately. For at least a few weeks, maybe longer." The woman felt her breath hitch in her throat. A room for weeks. She tried to process what he was saying. It sounded impossible. Just 10 minutes ago, she was worrying about how to buy diapers. Now, this stranger was arranging a hotel. It felt like a dream, the kind you wake up from crying because reality is so harsh. "I know it's last minute," he said, his voice firm but polite. "I can pay up front. Whatever the cost is, put it on my card. I just need to know that they have a safe, clean place to sleep tonight. Is there a suite available, something with a little extra space?" He listened for a moment, nodding his head. "Good. That works. Can you have it ready? I have someone bringing them over in about an hour. Her name is, well, I'll have the details for you. Just treat them well, please. They've had a hard time." He hung up the phone and slid it back into his pocket. He looked at her and smiled, a small, tired smile that reached his eyes. "It's done," he said. "I have a place for you. It's not too far from here. It's a nice hotel. Clean. Safe. They have a crib they can bring up to the room. You'll have a real bed, a shower, and air conditioning that actually works." The woman stared at him, her mouth slightly open. I don't understand," she stammered. Why would you do that for me?" He shrugged his shoulders, looking down at his boots for a second. "Because I can," he said simply. "And because you need it? I've been lucky in my life. I have more than I need. And when I see someone struggling, especially a mother trying to protect her kid, I just can't walk away. It wouldn't feel right." He reached back into his pocket and pulled out a thick white envelope. He held it out to her through the window. "Take this," he said. She hesitated. "I can't take money from you. You already bought all this food." "Please," he insisted, pushing the envelope toward her hand. "There's cash in here. It's not a loan. You don't pay me back. Use it for whatever else you need. Clothes for yourself, gas, maybe a taxi to get to the hotel later if you want. Just take it." Slowly, trembling, she reached out and took the envelope. It was heavy. She didn't look inside, but she could feel the thickness of the bills. It was more money than she had held in years. Tears started to stream down her face again, hot and fast. She looked down at the envelope, then up at him. She felt a strange mix of gratitude and shame, gratitude for what he was doing, but ashamed that she needed someone to save her like this. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with sobs. "Thank you so much. You don't know what this means." "I think I have an idea," he said softly. He looked toward the back seat of her car, where the bags of groceries were stacked. "Now, listen to me. I called a friend of mine who runs a family foundation. She's going to meet you at the hotel tomorrow morning. Her name is on a card in that envelope. She's going to help you figure out the next steps. Housing, jobs, whatever you need to get back on your feet. You don't have to do this alone anymore." He was organizing a future for her. It wasn't just a hot meal and a night of sleep. He was building a bridge back to the world she had lost. The woman felt a weight lifting off her shoulders that she had been carrying for so long she didn't even know it was there. She wasn't going to have to figure out where to park tonight. She wasn't going to have to wash her face in a gas station bathroom. She was going to have a roof. A real roof. He reached out and gently touched the baby's hand, who was now looking at him with wide, curious eyes. "You take care of your mom, okay little man," he said to the baby. The baby gurgled and reached out, grabbing onto his finger. The man didn't pull away. He let the baby hold his finger for a moment, and for a second, the woman saw a look of deep sadness and love in his eyes, a look that said he understood pain and loss in a way few people do. "All right," he said, pulling his hand back gently. "I have to go. But you go to that hotel. Check in. Get a shower. Sleep in a real bed." He turned to walk away, back toward his sleek black car. The woman rolled up the window, holding the envelope tight against her chest. She watched him open his car door. He paused for a second, looking back over his shoulder. He raised his hand in a small wave, just a simple gesture, and then got inside. The engine of his car started up, silent and smooth. He pulled out of the parking space and drove away, merging into the traffic without fanfare. No crowds gathered, no cameras flashing. He just disappeared back into the city, leaving the woman sitting there in her old sedan, surrounded by groceries and holding enough money to change her life. She sat in silence for a long time. The baby was happily playing with a box of crackers on the passenger seat. The air in the car was still, but it felt different now. It wasn't air thick with despair. It was air filled with possibility. She looked at the steering wheel, at her hands that had been gripping it so tight just an hour ago. She looked at the pile of food on the seat next to her. And then she looked at the hotel address written on a napkin he had handed her. She put the key in the ignition. The car started up with a rattle, but this time, the sound didn't make her feel hopeless. It sounded like the start of something new. She put the car in drive. She wasn't running away anymore. She was driving toward a destination. She was driving toward a future that, just an hour ago, she thought was impossible. As she pulled out of the parking lot, following the directions to the hotel, she whispered a thank you to the empty air, thanking the universe, and thanking the kind stranger who had seen her when she felt invisible. The drive to the hotel felt like the longest and shortest drive of her life. Her hands were sweating on the steering wheel, and her heart was beating a rhythm against her ribs that she couldn't quiet down. Every time she stopped at a red light, she expected a police officer to pull up beside her, or for the car to stall and never start again. She expected something to go wrong. For the last year, her life had been a series of things going wrong, and she had trained herself to expect disaster. But this time, nothing went wrong. She followed the scribbled directions on the napkin, turning down streets she had never driven on before, passing buildings that looked clean and bright. When the hotel finally came into view, it looked like a castle to her. It wasn't just a place to sleep, it was a fortress against the world she had been living in. She pulled into the parking lot, her old car looking out of place among the shiny vehicles, but for the first time, she didn't care. She had the white envelope in her bag. She had the key code written down. She checked in at the front desk. The clerk was polite, smiling as if checking in a woman with a baby and a bag of groceries was the most normal thing in the world. No judgment. No strange looks. Just a room key card sliding across the counter. She took it, holding it like it was made of gold. The room was on the second floor. When she opened the door, the air conditioning hit her face cool, crisp, and clean. She stood there for a long moment, just letting the air wash over her. Then she put the baby down in the middle of the huge, soft bed. He laughed, bouncing on the mattress, delighted by the springs. She laughed too, a sound that felt rusty in her throat but good to let out. The first thing she did was turn on the shower. She didn't shower to get clean, she showered to wash away the last 3 months. She stood under the hot water until it ran cold, letting the soap and steam take away the smell of the car, the fear, and the dirt. When she got out, she wrapped herself in a towel and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked different. Her face was relaxed. The permanent worry line between her eyebrows had started to fade. That night, she ordered room service. They ate pizza and drank cold juice, sitting on the floor of the hotel room because it felt more like a picnic that way. When it was time to sleep, the hotel staff brought up a small crib for the baby. He fell asleep instantly, surrounded by soft white blankets. She crawled into the queen-sized bed, stretching her legs out fully for the first time in months. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the air conditioner, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't cry. She just slept. The next morning, the real work began. The woman from the foundation arrived exactly when she said she would. She was kind, efficient, and didn't waste time with pity. She sat down with a cup of coffee and a notepad. She didn't ask about the past, she asked about the future. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "What are you good at?" Over the next few weeks, the hotel room became a base of operations. It wasn't just a place to hide, it was a place to plan. The envelope Keanu had given her was enough to pay for a few weeks of stay and buy her a new wardrobe, simple, clean clothes for job interviews. It gave her the breathing room she needed to think. She didn't have to spend all day wondering where she would park. She could spend her day applying for jobs and calling apartments. It wasn't easy. Rebuilding a life from zero never is. There were rejections. There were moments where she wanted to give up, where the old fear crept back in. But she had something now that she didn't have before, she had a safety net. She had people helping her. And she had the memory of that day in the parking lot whenever she felt like she couldn't do it, she remembered the way the stranger had looked at her. He hadn't seen a failure, he had seen a mother who needed a break. That belief in her gave her strength. 2 months later, she walked into a small office building for an interview. She was wearing a new blouse, and she had her hair tied back neatly. She shook hands with the manager and sat down. She was nervous, but she wasn't desperate. She looked the manager in the eye and answered the questions clearly. She told them she was hardworking, reliable, and eager to learn. She didn't tell them about the car. She didn't have to. That chapter was closing. She got the job. It was an administrative assistant position, answering phones, filing papers, managing schedules. It wasn't a high-powered career, but to her, it was everything. It was a paycheck. It was a routine. The next hurdle was housing. With a paycheck stub and the help of the foundation, she was able to secure a small apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't fancy. It was a one-bedroom unit on the third floor of a brick building. But it had a window that let in the morning sun. It had a kitchen with a stove where she could cook dinner for her son. And best of all, it had a door that locked. Moving day was quiet. She didn't have much furniture, just a bed, a crib for the baby, and a small table. But as she unpacked the bags of groceries into the real refrigerator, she felt a sense of peace settle over her that she hadn't felt in years. She put a small vase of flowers on the table, a treat to herself. One evening, a few weeks after they moved in, she was sitting on the living room floor, playing with blocks with the baby. He was bigger now, laughing and clapping his hands. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the room. There was a knock at the door. She stood up, surprised. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, there was no one there. Just a small package sitting on the doormat. She picked it up and brought it inside. It was a box of children's books and a few soft toys. There was no note, no return address. But she knew. She sat down on the floor again, pulling the baby onto her lap. She opened one of the books and started reading to him in a soft voice. Her heart felt full, so full it felt like it might burst. She thought about the man in the parking lot. She wondered if he ever knew what happened to them. She wondered if he knew that his small act of stopping to ask, "Do you need help?" had rippled out into a completely new life. She never saw him again. She never got to say a final thank you. Sometimes she would see his face on a movie poster at a bus stop or on a magazine cover in the grocery store line. She would smile and keep walking. He was a star to the world, but to her, he was just the person who saw her when she was invisible. As she turned the pages of the book, listening to her baby babble, she realized something profound. She wasn't just lucky. She was strong. She had survived the streets, the fear, and the cold. She had fought her way back. The stranger had opened the door, but she had been the one to walk through it. The baby grabbed the book and chewed on the corner, making her laugh. She looked around the small apartment. It was warm. It was safe. It was home. The nightmare was over. The future was waiting, bright and uncertain, but for the first time, she was ready for it. She closed her eyes for a second, sending a silent wish of kindness out into the universe, hoping that one day, if she ever saw someone else who was struggling, she would be brave enough to stop, to ask, and to help them change their life, too.